the old school. Some of the new people are really some of this new like nudge thing will remind you to follow up with it's really nice. Like it'll like an email that maybe like you didn't reply to and you ask them what someone else is and so it'll show back up in your inbox and say, you know, I like it. I hate when the new view like these bubbles and stuff.
Amazing guy, and this is a treat and a surprise to all of us and to me, but it is an honor. And so if you want to get to know the new guy in town, well, not in town, in the building, let's bring on in Mr. Zach Goodyear. Zach! How are you? Oh, one more.
On the side. How you doing? Where do I sit?
Will you sit right there? Okay. Would you like some coffee?
Okay, sure.
Yes, our stage hands will bring you a cup.
That sounds
Do
delightful.
you want it black or with any cream?
I don't need anything. Just black is great.
Little shot of Bailey. How do you like our new set, everybody?
Lovely.
Fancy, huh?
Is that real estate?
So, here's your now, you see, you have to get lunch.
What's for breakfast?
What's for breakfast?
Do you cheers with coffee? Does that have cheers? Cheers with coffee.
To 2019?
To 2019.
So, this really is fun for me to do. Who would have thought? In 2003, I walked into an office in Green Hills.
Yep.
And they said I could be the broker, right? And Bill Grangewich was there for a minute, and then Bill went off, and I became the broker of that office. and you were sitting right on that end.
Right on the end, right there. It's not a parking garage, but right next to it was me and then John McClanahan.
Right. And I remember that day, and so what I thought I'd do as a new broker, I thought I'd call everybody in one at a time and ask them what they thought about the company, Village, and what they liked and didn't like about it, and all of that. And what did you think that day? About
Do you
getting,
remember what I thought?
I don't know what you thought, but I do wanna know how it felt getting a new broker.
It felt good. I was excited. I think,
I was just curious how that transition happened for you.
so when Bill was my broker, and Bill's great. Bobby's a much better broker.
Oh, I didn't, that, okay.
But it was
Now,
good.
you're supposed to be really honest.
Really, that was honest.
Oh.
And I love Bill. But you taught me everything I know.
How long had you had your license?
So I got my license in, my mother-in-law paid for my real estate class because I was 22 and had no money and was working at Dell at the time. And so she knew I wanted to do it, and so but whatever it was, $100 or whatever.
So you had already married Martha?
I had not married Martha yet.
Oh, I didn't think so, cause I thought I remembered, okay.
So it was sort of an insurance policy, I guess, maybe. For
She needed to make sure her daughter could get some,
Yeah, could
could
be
take
okay.
care of, okay.
And so we went to some place in Green Hills for a class and did that for 2 weeks. And on February 2nd, 2003, I started.
Wow.
And I tried to start earlier, but Bill Bainbridge wouldn't let me work part-time, and so which was great. In hindsight, it was perfect. And so I quit
So
my
you're
job on
working
Friday,
at Dell, and you quit your job,
and then started on a Monday.
and
Walked
so
into those
that
on
was
Monday.
pretty brave.
Yeah.
So what gave you the courage to just cold turkey into Rose?
I think being youthful and having no idea. I had a week's worth of hot dogs and beer in my fridge.
And didn't you graduate from Swanee?
I did, 2001.
Yeah. So you were dark haired?
Dark hair, had a little more.
Yeah. So that transition wasn't hard for you?
No, it was a pretty quick transition. After Swanee, we had a volunteer fire department and an ambulance service in Swanee, and I was part of the ambulance service, so I was an EMT. Hey, so we had a volunteer fire department and an ambulance service in Swanee, and so I was an EMT. I was part of the ambulance service, and so I was still licensed as an EMT. So I moved to Nashville kind of on a whim. Did a brief stint in DC. Moved to Nashville on a whim and worked for a ambulance service here, a private ambulance service, which in Swanee was the greatest thing I ever did, and here it was the worst thing I ever did. You're literally stuck in a box with the patient side was great, but I was stuck in a box with people who were just hated life and were kind of miserable, and I was stuck in a little cab of an ambulance with them for 12 and 24 hours straight.
Wow.
And so
That would be hard for you,
So
Mr. Positive. If that
yeah, I hate quitting things, and so I did my best to try to get fired, and it kept not working. And I didn't want to do anything crazy, but I remember I drove to New Orleans for Christmas, spent Christmas with my mom, drove back to Nashville the next day, because I had to work that morning, went in and they had the schedule posted, and somebody had messed up and didn't put my name on it. And so I got right back in the car and went to New Orleans for a week. and didn't have a cell phone, so they had nowhere to reach me. So I came back a week later after New Year's, and they said, "Where the hell have you been?" And I said, "Well, I wasn't on the schedule for the week." And they kind of gave me one of those, but they didn't fire me.
Oh, man.
So it didn't work. So anyway, so shortly after that, I took a job at Dell selling computers on the phone, wore a headset. Thank you for choosing Dell. My name is Zach. What may I build for you today? And,
So you're a technological genius.
not a genius. Not a genius, no.
So this is something that village agents are gonna be really excited. They haven't had a principal broker at HBV that could know anything about technology. You guys were all limited with my knowledge, and now you are the whole enchilada. Technology
You know, I
and.
guess so. It's never been called an enchilada, but I like it.
So everybody can come to you now with their technology problem.
Yeah. Chris, where are you?
No, that's wonderful. That's really good.
No, this was actually the most exciting thing when I got here, and I met Chris, and I thought, oh, this is going to free up so much time. So,
Yeah, it did free up my time.
that's right.
So then back in 2003, and we became friends, sort of, broker friends.
Yeah.
And I remember a gentleman that was a client of yours.
You do?
His name was Scott.
Oh, yeah.
And you came in and said, this is really a bummer. My best client wants me to leave.
I thought it was a bummer. I didn't have a
did?
mindset of abundance like that.
Yeah.
And, I thought it
How
was
were
good.
you doing at that time? You had been, what, 6 months into the business?
So 6 months in, yep. So it was, so Scott went to Swanee as well. He was 3 years older than I was. So I was a freshman when he was a senior.
Oh,
He
where
is.
he?
Yeah. He's, I don't know where he is.
He didn't know he was gonna be talking about it.
It's probably best for the best. So he was a freshman, or I was a freshman when he was a senior, and we crossed paths a little bit. And then he came to Nashville and worked for Belmont University and in their residential life program. So he lived in a dorm, which was he got a master's in leadership in Memphis, and then came back and lived in a dorm as a 25-year-old. And then called me one day and said, hey, let's get together for lunch. I want to talk about real estate. And I was like, yes. Got a new client? And at lunch he said, so I'm thinking about getting my license. And I said, you don't need to do that.
You need to buy a house.
So, because I thought that we all knew this, but we did know all the same people, and so my opinion and thought at the time was that my business, which was kind of not much then, was going to get cut in half. So half of not much was even less. And I got a little scared, but we started working together. We said, all right, it was kind of funny. It was a little arrogant at the time, but it was our way of thinking about taking care of people. And we said, for anyone that knows both of us, we don't want to give them the burden of having to choose between us. So we'll just work with them together. And we did that a couple times, and that's how it started.
Yeah.
Kind of like the guy.
And you're still working together.
Still working together.
That's a long-
15, 16 years later.
That's something.
Yeah.
And do you do everything together? Are you,
Everything together.
right,
Yeah.
good.
50-50 down the middle.
Ever since.
Yeah, ever since.
And
We
that's
never looked
16
back.
years. That's a long haul for a partnership to work.
It is.
There must have been something there. Pretty terrific.
I mean, he's a pretty handsome guy.
He is. So what happened back a little bit, why did you come to Village at that time? Why did you choose Village as your first home?
So I met, at the time, Dee Davis, who's an agent here, great agent here, and she was, if you don't know Dee, she has really fun glasses and cool hair. But it was a cookout in the summer of 2002, and I told her that I was interested in being in real estate. My dad was in the life insurance business in New Orleans, and he got cancer and died a month to the day before I graduated from Swanee. So that rocked my world a little bit, and he'd always said, I think you'd be great in real estate. You should look into it. And I was interested in, actually, I wanted to go into federal law enforcement. I wanted to save the world, and
Like James Bond?
absolutely, yeah. And so I was like, you don't know what you're talking about. But when you have a family member or somebody who's a good mentor to you and they're gone, then you start thinking about it and saying, I wonder what Dad would say. And real estate kept coming back up. So at this cookout, she said she was in real estate, and I said, oh, my dad said I should look into real estate. What's it all about? And she said, well, I work for a couple of other companies, but now with this company called Village, you don't need to look anywhere else. Just come talk to me. We'll get you set up. And that's what I did.
Cool. And so you were at Village for how many years?
I was at Village from February 2002 or 3 to March of 2012.
Right. And we worked together.
We worked together a lot.
Yeah. and we had a great time.
Absolutely.
And you were one of my favorite people. How did you build your business?
Still is.
Still is. You're one of my favorite people still.
Well, there was a gap.
Just to clarify.
There was a gap.
So,
Tommy, how did you build a business which you did so successfully? And I know you had Scott, but it was a new area for you.
yeah, so we didn't know anybody here, so it was all trying to meet new people, and we had a few people that we met, but it all started at holiday parties like Christmas season 2002, just before I started, and I was just, 22 years old, and I'd wander around and talk to people and ask them what they were doing, and they'd say, what are you doing? And I was just excited, and I'd say, I'm about to get into real estate and get my license, and luckily I had my first client before my license had even come in the mail, and I had no idea what I was doing, because I hadn't met Bobby yet. And so I called Dee and I said, can you help me please? Let's split this deal and do it together, and can you show me the ropes? And they bought a house in, gosh, I can't remember the address. I know exactly where it is, but right off White Ridge, there in Brookside, and 1,444 square feet. Like they all are. And that was my first closing, and it was amazing.
Wow.
And I got hooked. And so I didn't make very much money my first year. My wife reminds me that she was still a student, and she had I think her parents were sending her $200 a month for gas and food and things like that. And she drove to Nashville, and I had to fill my car with gas. And she stocked my fridge with food, and then she left, and I had a party. And she was really pissed. But that party produced another client. And so that was kind of my theme, was parties are a good thing. Social outings and social excursions are a good thing. And anytime somebody packs my fridge, I'm going to empty it out and have a party.
Wow. So that's how you built. So what happened to you guys in 2007, 2008? If you all don't remember, or you are trying to forget it, or you
There was a
want
blip.
to forget it, there was a blip.
Blip.
Blip in the market.
Yeah.
And for you, that was your first experience.
It was my first experience.
Of that kind of.
Yeah. So yeah, somebody said, I remember in 2005 I was showing a house, and the parent of this buyer said, so you think there's a bubble? And I had no idea what a bubble was. And I was like, I thought he was just a creep. But I was like, what are you talking about, a bubble? Clueless, but it was good. And I think being clueless about it was perfect, because I didn't know that, I had no idea or worry about what could go wrong.
So did you experience any?
Yeah,
Bubbles?
we experienced some bubbles, but not much. I mean, we kept doing our same thing. I think the most frustrating thing was I had to sell every house that year. I had to sell it 2 or 3 times. Listings I had, people would back up inspections, and there was a great little chart in the listing package here, probably still, and it's sort of a stair-step chart, and it has a line, and it says, "Here's the market price," and if you stay in the market too long, you're going to drop, and then eventually you're going to sell below market price. And I did that with every single listing that year. And that little chart is one of my favorite charts, because it experienced it, and it's very true.
That's our pyramid chart.
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So that's
So
that.
you made it through that.
I made it through.
Unscathed.
A little bit. So Mark Coachman was, I was really fascinated by condos, and I love old houses and new condos. I grew up in an 1860s house in New Orleans, and so I love crooked things and squeaky floors and tall ceilings. But on the new condo, I had never, the condo side and kind of the loft side of things, I had never experienced that. And so I thought it was really neat. So I started hanging around Mark a little bit and listening to him, and started hanging around Hunter, and really just kind of being around. And being a little bit of a stalker, I guess, and so,
And at that time, Hunter had come, in about the same year, 2003, and
Yeah.
had come to help Mark and work with CORE and begin CORE. Is that correct, Mark? You were supposed to be in this seat, but I'll refer. So just keep our timeline straight, okay?
That's right.
And that's when you met Hunter.
And that's when I met Hunter and Aaron. Has anybody sold a property called 12 South Towers, right behind Sevier Park? It's a little 4-unit condos. So that's where I first met Aaron. I walked into the old Hillsborough Village office, and Aaron said, and I was curious about them because you could buy a 2-bedroom townhome for $99,000 and in 12 South. And
We should have all.
I barely had $99, I barely had $99, a little bit of $99,000. But I was excited to buy it, and I wanted to buy one, but I couldn't yet. Talked to a lender, and they was like, "Oh, you're self-employed. You actually have to work for 2 years of like good income before you can get a loan." So for the house we ended up buying, my wife was in grad school and working part-time at Barnes & Noble, and we got a loan on her salary alone. Which I had no idea we did. But 12 South Towers, Mark was listing it, right? And that was an old, maybe it was some Section 8 housing, or it was something. It was these guys ripped the roofs off of them, and they renovated them and kind of made them a little bit modern. But it was a great buy, and those sold really, really well and quickly, and I was impressed by that, and I wanted to do something like that, and so I just started hanging around. And then ended up working on Mark's team for a little bit, and we did, Scott was doing some stuff with Bristol Development Group, which was doing Bristol on Broadway and Bristol West End and the Icon, and it all seemed so glamorous and kind of sexy,
And the Gulch was just nothing.
and yeah, the Gulch was nothing, it was nothing. And I remember I think Mark or Hunter talked to me about Rolling Mill Hill, and it was going to be this awesome project, and
It's still awesome.
it's still awesome. And John McClanahan said, and I remember these words exactly, and it's a classic John, so
Oh, here we go.
pardon the French, but I said, "What do you think about this?" He said, "You know, you're gonna make a lot of money. You're gonna work your ass off, but you're gonna make a lot of money." And me and a team did work our tails off, and then the developer went belly up right before closing, and we made no money.
Nobody made any money on that deal. John, you missed that one.
And so that was 3 years of my life that we won't get back, but it was a great learning experience. And I remember Mark invested a lot of money into the marketing and advertising of it, and which was great, very well done. And you may or may not remember this, but one of the original flat screen TVs we had in our sales center, and this thing weighed
gosh,
like 200 pounds. It was plasma or something, I don't know. And so I brought it back and
Oh,
gave it to
yeah.
him right in that lobby, and I said, whatever you spend, I said, here's your, $200,000 television. 200,000, whatever it was, and he said, "Thanks, I don't think I want that." Bad reminder. So anyway, that was a good wake up call that kind of new construction sales can look really glamorous, but it's a lot of hard work, and
Well, even
things
the
can go
Icon,
wrong.
if you recall, we sold them out that one day. It was amazing what was going on.
220 units in one day.
Yeah, and it was like a machine. Everybody
Sold them.
sold them.
Yeah,
And then they all fell out
that's right.
in
So
20.
2 years later, in 2008, when people said, obviously you were contacting them before, but Scott was, the way he tells it is basically, people said, you call them and say, "Hey, we're going to schedule your closing," and they'd say, "Closing on what?" But I don't think I bought a condo. No, I don't remember doing that. And so it was,
They didn't want to believe.
2.5 years ago, I did that. I missed $5,000. I don't even remember having that.
Just
So,
go ahead and keep it.
I think you're mistaking me for somebody else. So they had to resell the whole,
The
basically
whole
almost the whole
entire
building.
thing.
And it took 6 years instead of 2.
Yeah,
So
so there were a little bit of fallout.
there's a blip.
That's a bubble.
It was a bump.
It was a big bubble. But we made it.
We made it.
And so there was a gap
There was a gap.
where you and your friends who, decided that you wanted to go
Not
out
all my
and-
friends, because you didn't come.
Oh.
I do remember that day.
I remember that day too. It was the hardest thing that I've ever done.
And so you decided that you were gonna go out and try your little wings.
Yeah, so we were trying to figure out kind of what was the next challenge, and so we thought, this is a good one. And at the time, this is a kind of a funny picture, and you may or may not be able to see it, but we'd been introduced to a guy named Bob Parks who is out, had a very suburban real estate brand, and we said, well, we want to have an office in the Gulch.
In Murfreesboro.
In Murfreesboro. And this is what it looked like. You can see that. If you remember that, right?
Just
And
yeah.
a lot of you in this room, I still remember, actually told me, you are insane.
And I was
And
one of them.
that is crazy. Because Village had this, Village was the game in town. And so there's nothing wrong with Village, we wanted to try something new. So we went there, did a little rebrand for,
A big
a big rebrand, and it was awesome. It kind of took off, and it's amazing what is in a brand, right? So, what's in a sign, a brand, coffee mug, it makes people think of something. And so it was neat kind of going through that process and hearing what people were thinking when they saw a brand, and that was a cool experience. And so
And that was your first, time that you became an actual managing
that was the first time I became a managing broker,
And how'd you like that?
it was a thrill. I loved it. I still love it.
Right.
It is it was hard, and I had no idea how many times people would call and say, hey, do you have a quick second?
Or, hey, I've got a quick question.
A quick question?
Just quick question.
And so, funny enough, I would go, Bob said, we need to get you to have an office, and I said, I don't want an office. I want to be out in the open. And he said, why? And I said, well, Bobby Noreen, my broker, I used to watch people go into her office and say, hey, do you have just a second? Quick question, and they would come out an hour later, and I said, that was not a question, that was a quick question. And, but you're a very good therapist. So, people would, that's half of what realtors do, right? It's a therapist for clients. So that was the,
So you didn't wanna repeat anything?
so I did not want to repeat that because I thought I will never get anything done. I still wanted to sell. And so we went to an office from this size down to about, 2,500 square feet. And I felt like I could just see everybody, and so I was just out in the open. And it was great, and it was a great experience, and kind of taught me that sort of managing by wandering around is my favorite style. And
Well, that's good news.
it works out. Even yesterday, we were doing that, and I just asked somebody, how's everything going? What are you working on?
So I don't
And
need to pack.
And there you go. And turned into a great, 30-minute conversation that added a lot of value to them and added a lot of value to me. Because anytime you have a conversation with somebody, you learn something. I hope.
That's what makes you a good broker.
That's right.
That listening.
That's good.
What
So
do you-
speaking of listening,
What are you doing?
Uh-oh.
I just
I
had a couple
didn't say
questions for
you
you.
had any, I'm not done with you.
I'll just ask you an easy one. What's your favorite color, Bobby?
My favorite color is teal blue.
Teal blue. You don't have any teal blue on today.
Not today. I do have a little right here.
Oh, there you go. I did notice that. That's good. I'm just gonna throw a few interspersed here.
Was that it?
There's got a whole page.
Oh, you have a whole page? I didn't write Zach's questions down, so he had no idea what I was gonna say. So, you had this wonderful career on your own, away from Village. And then there was this opportunity that came just out of the blue.
Out of the blue.
And because you loved it and loved Village so much, y'all came back.
We came back. And it was,
And decided, we have learned enough, we're gonna take it over. We're gonna do
We're
a
gonna
take
join.
on-
We're gonna join.
You're gonna join. And you're gonna bring back all the things that you learned?
We can bring back all the things that we learned, and I think that's,
It's
to me,
fun.
that's the most exciting thing, is to be, again, that conversation and learning and being able to interact with different people and, you know, just gain experience and learn. I never wanna pass up a meal with somebody or a conversation with somebody, because you can always get a different perspective.
Mhm.
And I think I've been able to get a different perspective.
So what's your favorite color?
My favorite color is green, actually.
Green.
My mom's favorite color is purple.
Aw.
And I always liked the dark green,
Okay.
but purple's pretty high up there.
Pretty.
Swanee was where I graduated from college is purple, so I do like my purple.
Okay, well,
I didn't wear
welcome
purple
back.
socks today, but one the other day.
No, well, welcome back to Brooklyn.
Thank you.
We're excited to have you. I know that Zach and all of you guys are going to bring a tremendous amount of energy and new ideas and fun to us, and we're excited to be with you.
Well, we are too.
Zach's is going to be a wonderful broker here at Village. Wonderful.
What is your This is a big one. Ready?
Oh, I don't know.
What is one of your proudest moments? Doesn't have to be the proudest, but one of your proudest moments that does not include family or work.
Whoa, that's tough.
Sit back and let her noodle on that for a minute.
Family or work?
Yeah, so
When you say work.
in other words, you can't say raising my children.
That wasn't even good. My mind.
You can go there.
And it is Ted's birthday today.
Happy birthday, Ted.
Happy birthday, Ted.
Happy birthday, Ted. 44 years.
Woo!
How old are you?
I am 39 and 9/10.
Ooh.
Maybe 19
So I
twenties.
could almost be your grandma.
A week left.
All right, so,
So your proudest moment?
but
A proudest
work,
moment.
what is work?
No, in other words, you can't say being a broker.
Okay, I don't know, there's a couple things when I came here to Nashville, I looked around at some people, one of them was Sharon Langford.
Yeah.
Does anybody remember Sharon Langford?
Yep.
You do?
Teal signs.
Yeah, Sharon Langford though used to be with a company which everybody started at in Nashville, which is long since gone, it was called Dobson and Johnson. And I was fortunate enough to become the managing broker of the Brentwood office at Dobson and Johnson. And Mr. Johnson said, I need a broker, you're one, I'll let you be the broker, but I'm not paying you. Not a dime. And I said, you know what, Mr. Johnson, I'm gonna take you up on that, because nobody knows who I am. Nobody's heard of me. I've got 22 years in California, sailed in here, and I have no cred, nothing. And so I said, I'm gonna take you up on that, and I will be the best managing broker that you've ever had, and I will work for free until I come to you and I say, Mr. Johnson, I no longer need you to give me street cred, and now I'm gonna ask you to pay me. And I was his best broker, or one of them. And he said, I'm not paying you. And I said, well, I'm leaving. He said, no, you won't leave me. I said, yes, I will. He said, well, I'm not paying you. I said, well, I'm leaving. This went on for 2 weeks. He still didn't pay. It was a government shutdown for sure. And so then I did leave. I walked out. And that's when.
How'd that feel?
It was scary and powerful. But I realized that I had built something for myself. And I always looked at Sharon Langford because she also went off, left Dobson and Johnson, and she became the, well, the first thing I remember, she became the Educator of the Year. And I was so impressed. And then she also became the president of the Tennessee Real Estate Education Foundation, TREEF. And I was so impressed, and I said, if I ever become successful, I will have those two things.
Is it Girl Crush? Girl Crush?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So in 2014, I got the Educator of the Year, which was my proudest honor
That's
in
incredible.
real estate. And in 2020, next year, I will be the president of the That's my passion, and so I'm very proud of those things, and that I was able to follow in her footsteps.
That's good. That's a great story. Has anybody heard that before?
Yeah. Anybody in my jump start has heard it.
Okay.
It's called, if you're going to do something, do it the best you can, even if you choose not to make any money, because your reputation is more important than the money.
I love that. So what about your hobbies? Are you reading anything right now? Are you listening to anything right now? Are you talking to anyone right now?
Are you talking about like growth wise?
Or
Just trash?
good,
Daniel
just
Steele?
Daniel Steele? What page are you on?
No. I have two favorite books that I've read and I reread, and I read other things, and it just says the same thing but the referral engine and the commitment engine, John Jones. I've read the Ninja book, and everything really, there's nothing new. It's just a new way of putting it.
That's right.
It's
You
exciting.
sell a lot of books that way by putting something a new format.
I'm gonna write a book,
You should do it.
but it's not gonna say anything new.
It's okay.
That's a problem. Mark wrote a great book.
Yep, you did.
Yeah. And you did say some new things. But, I don't know if I'll write a book, but I paint. I'm painting. I love painting. I'm not good. I just paint.
Passion is good.
Are we done?
No, we're not done. So I was always intrigued and curious about Foster when I was here. Does anyone know who Foster is or was? Can you tell them about Foster?
Oh, I'm so sad. Did you ever meet Foster?
I never met Foster.
So when we moved here, it was my 42nd birthday. So I wasn't much older than you. And Ted was 16. And I moved a 16-year-old going into his junior year of high school from Los Angeles, California to Nashville, Tennessee. And he was
So excited.
Yeah. He almost reported me for child abuse. There was a law against that.
And it wasn't really Nashville as a metropolis.
Oh, no.
It was a cow town.
We had meat and threes, which I had no idea what that was. I learned that Jell-O is a vegetable or something. There was nothing to eat. It was really something. So we had this 6 acres, and I promised him that if I'd buy him 2 things that he always wanted: a dirt bike and a chainsaw. He always thought chainsaws were cool, and I said, we're gonna move to a place you can have a dirt bike and a chainsaw. So the first thing I bought him was a chainsaw and a dirt bike. And John was with Highway 101 and was on the road, and he was gone the whole time. And so Ted, I was still going back to California the first year. I would spend 4 weeks here and 2 weeks there. And I sold almost 18 million while I was living here. I got a fax machine.
Woo, what?
And I mean, I was working from here, and then I'd go back. Nobody knew I moved for a whole year from California because I had a big trip. But I'd go stay at somebody's house, and I'd go to every party. So people thought I was still around. Anyway, while I was gone, I had left Ted with the people that were now kind of our caretakers of the house while I was gone, and that was Cookie and Rudy. If y'all know Cookie. Cookie's now
Cookie was my next question, but
okay. So anyway, so while I was gone, Cookie and Rudy took Ted to a farm out in College Grove, a dairy farm, and he bought for $50 a 5-day-old male Holstein calf. And when I came home, we had this dog house, and Ted had taken the front of it out, and
little right then, right?
yeah, he was little like this.
Not that big.
And when I drove up from coming back, it was my birthday, and there was this calf, like sitting in this little dog house, like in a manger, with I went nuts. I mean, I loved that calf. He was my baby, and so we made him a barn. He has a sign that says Foster,
So Foster did not stay this size.
No, Foster ended up being 3,000 pounds. I
Did
remember.
Foster snuggle with you in bed, or is that?
Well, I had Foster in the house for a while. I kept him in the laundry room because I didn't want him to get cold and I didn't want his knees to get dirty. So I would wash his knees. And I'd have to feed him in the morning and at night, a bottle, because he was, and I loved him. He smelled like grass. And I'd have to get up at 5 in the morning and take him for a walk.
So did you have a leash?
I did. We had a halter, yeah. And Ted,
Grow horns?
well, we had him dehorned and de-neutered or what, you know. Yeah, so he became a steer.
D a few things.
Yeah, and Ted had a dirt bike, and they would play charge, and then they would duck each other. They had so much fun. And they would do crazy eggs, and you call him, and he would come, and he loved Ted. And when Ted went off to college, Foster was so heartbroken. When he saw Ted's car come, he just goes nuts. It was the sweetest thing. He was like but he was huge. He was 6 feet at his withers, you know, his shoulders, and his head was about.
So his shoulders were this high.
Oh my God.
That's a big cow.
Oh, he was huge. And I remember the first time I went to the co-op and I went in to get his food and grain and figure out what you needed to do. And I said, so how long?
Before Costco.
There was no Costco. And I said, how long do they live? And the guy said, I don't know. We usually don't let them live that long. But unfortunately, he got so big. At 11 years old, his legs gave out and he went down. And I had the vet come out and do all kinds of cortisone shots, but we couldn't get him up. And so they said we had to put him down. So we held him, and the night before, we laid with him out in the field, Garrett and us.
Remember this?
And then they came and they put him down. We held his head, and then we left. And I really was. Should I tell this part? This awful part.
Yes.
So I felt really horrible. And before they put him down, I said to John, I just don't want to let him go. You know, and you know, what was his name? Roger. What's that guy? Roy Rogers.
Yeah,
Roy Rogers had stuffed Trigger, and I had seen Trigger, you know, and so I said to John, well, I know we can't stuff him, but I would really like to skin him and have this gorgeous fur of his. And so John was just, oh my God, sick. And I talked to several people, and they thought I was sick, but I called a taxidermist in Mount Juliet, and we had
We have those things in Tennessee.
Yes, and he was
Not so much in LA.
He was really nice, and he said, "I'll be glad to come out and do this for you, but you're gonna have to rent a backhoe because we're gonna have to dig a hole, and you're not gonna. I mean, this is gonna be big." So we rented this giant backhoe that came out, and this guy came out, and we went and found him a marker, and when we came back, there was a beautiful little cross with this little grave, and there was nothing to see. And 18 months later, because that's how long it took it, 2 men had to carry in this tanned hide that covered as a double bed all the way to the floor.
Oh, wow.
It was gorgeous, and it had the tail on it, because his tail was blue. And so that now lives in Ted's house, in his bedroom, on the floor.
Wow.
And I have the headpiece that's that beautiful white triangle in my house. And I don't think it's sick at all.
The things you never knew about Bobby.
Yeah.
Did you already know that Bobby had a cow named Foster?
Okay, that's my Foster story.
That's a great story.
I love Foster.
Thank you. So when Bobby told me, I was always fascinated by someone in the house like a cow. And then I heard one day, and she said that to me, and she said, you know, I knew that Foster had died, and she said, well, we're having him skinned. And used that word, and I just thought that was even more interesting and curious. But you said it beautifully like that, and you were, that was before the 18 months, and you were excited, and Foster lives on.
He lives, and he's so beautiful. I mean, you should see how gorgeous he is. He's gorgeous. And I get to pet it. Now, we have lost some other pets since then, and none of them have kids. This is not something we do in our house. We do have little boxes, though, all over the house. Little boxes. But nobody else got skinned.
Well, that's good.
Okay.
No taxidermy for you.
No more.
Okay.
Is that it?
That's it for a little bit, yeah.
What time is that?
You've got time.
I've got more time. So Zach, what is your, so you and Brian Stoltzfus, who was also a brand new village agent
Yeah.
that came to all my classes,
He
and
used to tell me about calling his first deal. He was at a dinner party, and he was like, I was basically under the table, bobbing green at night, saying, "What do I do? What do I do?" And he had a paper contract and trying to fill it out, and I was like, "What do I put here?" So,
and David Doris.
David Doris.
David too.
Mhm.
He's brand new.
Yeah.
And David,
Do you know David's story?
I think.
So David was working at, so David's dad, family owns a plumbing company
Plumbing. Not a little plumbing.
called Bucci Plumbing. And David was doing, speaking of dairy, David was doing plumbing. This is not like go fix a toilet plumbing. This is like go into a dairy farm and probably things you don't want to know about where your milk comes from, but or what it looks like, and fixing like kind of in sour, gross vats of something and having to like wade through it and waders and fix plumbing. Just kind of a not very pleasant job. And Hunter called
David's cousin.
Is David's cousin. Called David and said, "How much money do you make in rent?"
Working
It was
for
like,
your parents.
yeah, $28,000 a year or something. And he said, and he had they were renovating. Core was renovating a apartment building called the Chesterfield, or the Westchester, which is right across from the Chesterfield houses. And he said, I think there were 32 units, and he said, "Why don't you get a real estate license, and I'm going to pay you $1,000 a unit if you can sell these things." And David kind of did the math, and he's like, "All right, I don't have to wade through sour milk, and I can make a little bit more money, and it sounds great." And so he did it, and then he sold them in a matter of, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, 3 months, and he was hooked. And that was the beginning of David.
Yeah, beginning of David.
Yeah.
Yes, he's done very well for himself.
Is that all right?
So now, you have formed this group.
We have this little group that we all admired each other and have worked together in various things over the years. Brian and I did the kind of our, inspired by Mark, our fascination for condos and high-rises. So we worked with Ray Hensler on the 1212 building, and then Brian worked with me on that. And
What was the one on Des Moines?
Rhythm at Music Row.
Rhythm.
Yeah. That was an interesting one as well. Yeah, so that's that.
So what is your, I know you said this when we had our first introduction at the beginning of the year, which was only 2 weeks ago or
Yeah.
something, so. But what are your aspirations now that you have moved into the big leagues?
The big leagues. My aspirations are to learn. I want to learn. I want to get to know everybody whom I don't know. I want to help other people learn. I think there's always, again, Bobby taught me about the importance of education and the importance of always learning. I am a true believer in lifelong learning, and I love education, and I love really everything to me is education. So I lead by curiosity, and so that can sometimes get the best of me, but it's taken me to a lot of fascinating places. And so I think just continuing that and continuing Village as a strong company, and I want Village to be the undisputed strongest company in Nashville in very short order.
Here, here. Cheers, everybody.
Cheers.
So sometime in here, you married Martha.
I did, 2004, July 31st.
She hung in there.
2005, sorry. Katrina was in 2005, and my mother and sister and their dogs and my sister's kids came to live with us for a weekend and stayed 9 months.
All
That was
the
an
same.
interesting first year of marriage. Yeah.
Well, Martha, she hung in there.
Yeah, well, yeah. There
And
was,
so then you had.
there was one epic battle between her and my mom. But
So you had some children.
I did have 3 children.
So the first one.
First one's Caroline, and Bobby gave me a beautiful baby book, which we still have. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And Caroline is 7.5, and in 2nd grade, and she is into, what's that? She's obsessed with horses, but we've never really let her go near a horse because we're scared that she might want one as a pet. And that feels very expensive. Any riders in here? Martha rode horses, and she said that I would need to really sell a lot more real estate if we want to have a horse. So,
So
there's no horse
then
in
you
the
had
house.
another girl.
We did have another girl named Catherine, who's 5.5, in kindergarten.
And
And
then,
then we had a boy named Andrew, who named after my dad. And we didn't know what any of them were, so I called, I have a brother named Andrew also. He's in a wheelchair. He was in a car accident when he was 17. Drunk driver hit him, but he's great, most successful person in our family, so don't feel bad. But he was so he doesn't have any kids himself, but so I said, you know, I'd love to name, at the time, Caroline. We didn't know what she was. This boy, I want to name him Andrew. Would you be okay with that? And he said yes. And so, yeah, I said, he called me, knew Martha's in labor, and he kept calling and saying, is Andrew here yet? And I said, Caroline's here. And so the same thing with Catherine. He didn't know, and so he was excited, and he said, is Andrew here yet? And I said, Catherine's here. So finally, he made the call with number 3, and I said, Andrew's here.
oh,
So,
that's neat.
it was
That's
good.
really
Yeah.
cool. I bet he loved that.
So it was exciting.
Yeah. And Andrew is how old?
So Andrew's now 2.5.
Oh, you are in the fun
So
part.
he's great.
Yeah.
We're having a good time.
And you're a great dad.
I love being a dad. It's a lot of fun. I'm kind of a big kid, and so I like to go on adventures with them and make things fun. And
That's very cool.
Caroline knew about this and has been obsessed with Village for the last month, and has kept wanting to come see the office. And so this past weekend, we brought them here, and they were running the halls and maybe spun in these chairs 600 times. They were super excited to see it.
That's great. That's really good.
And her favorite color is purple.
So does anybody have any questions for Zach?
Or Bobby.
Or Zach?
What's up? Beth?
Hey, Zach. So I have a question. So when you went to parks, what was the single most important decision you think you made that affected a great outcome within the first 6 months from down there?
So if you didn't hear that, did anybody hear it? No?
For the company, like.
She said, let me see if I say this right, what was the single most
What do you think was the single most important decision
important
you made? when you
decision
went
that
down to
Zach
the-
made at Parks during his first 6 months?
Correct. That had the biggest impact on the shift.
On this, okay.
Yeah, I think definitely freshening the brand from the 1975 red and yellow and black, and there were different signs out, and just creating consistency with that which wasn't consistent totally, but we made Nashville consistent. And then a few years later, the outskirt, the Murfreesboro, Williamson County offices got on board with that. But that was the single most important one was that.
So you were the one driving the rebranding of parks?
Yeah, so we basically said, you know, when we met with Bob, we said, we think you're great, we like your company, kind of hate your logo and brand. Could we change it? It sort of I didn't know. I said, it looks like it's from 1975. Just kind of trying to be
Which
funny.
you said it
and
was.
he said, well, that's funny because I started the company in 1975, so it is from 1975. And then I tried to put my foot in my mouth a little bit, but it was good. And so that was that. And probably the second most important thing was learning how to be a broker, but learning how to say yes to the right people that should be in real estate, and to say no to the people that probably shouldn't be in real estate or in that office. You know, just, I'm not a fan of takers, and, there's, you know, as you have, you know, sometimes you interview people and they're not a fit, and, building that culture was exciting, but it was not without its bumps. I didn't know how to do that. I didn't really know how to say no to somebody, because it's hard. And so, you know, there were a handful of people that we brought on that were just not a great fit, and then you gotta say no then, and that's even harder.
You helped him find a new career path?
Well, Mark Deutschman taught me, when, I can't, maybe it was an agent, whatever it was, he said, just, you know, you're freeing up their future.
Freeing up their future. Isn't that a nice word?
That's good.
Freeing up their future. That's a way to put it. Are you gonna continue to sell?
But I think there is actually, there's some beauty in that, because, you know, I mean, the expression, when one door closes, another one opens. You know, opportunities exist everywhere, and you gotta open your eyes to them sometimes. And I think that happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so.
Are you gonna continue to sell?
So I'm gonna continue to sell somewhat through Scott and Crystal, who is, was our assistant for 5 years, 6 years, which was, if you've ever had to hire an assistant the first time, it's terrifying.
Hey, Tony.
Because, and Bobby always, and you taught me how to do it, and you said there's certain thresholds of when you should do it, but I had this mindset that I can do it. You know, I'm a kind of roll up your sleeves kind of guy, and I can do it myself. And my biggest fear was bringing somebody on and not being able to support them. And so anyway, we did it, and we said, I can't remember what we said, but we said, we'll pay you X dollars an hour for 40 hours a week. And she said, how about you hire me for 20 hours a week, pay me double that, and I'll do 40 hours worth of work in 20 hours. And I said, okay. And so that was the beginning of that. And she was great, and it was an awesome thing for me and Scott to kind of be able to free up some of our time, and it really grew our business. And she's been a huge asset and a really good friend.
And so you've had her with you for 6 years?
6 years, yeah.
That's great.
And she, but she wanted to, I knew she was intrigued about selling, and I knew she would be good at it, so we talked to her about getting a real estate license, and she put us off a little bit, but finally did, and, about a year ago, and she is, she's doing okay.
The reason I asked you that is because I know there's a lot of people here that want to know your availability.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of
That's right. So my availability is gonna be, great right now. I think my last 2 weeks I've spent in meetings with Troy's been meeting with all the staff and a lot of agents just to get to know everybody, so it's gonna take a minute, but I'd love to sit down with everybody, or go to lunch, or go to coffee, or whatever. I don't really drink coffee, so I just drank a cup, and I feel like
So you're gonna be busy.
maybe I'll need more coffee.
Yeah.
So busy, I don't really like the word busy.
You don't like busy?
Uh-uh.
Oh, what would you like it?
So my biggest pet peeve is when people say, I know you're busy, but, because that signifies to me that they think that I don't value their time, or that I don't value your time, and that's not the case. And so people who've worked with me in the past have probably heard me say that, but also it got to a point where probably a year ago, Martha, my wife and I were, you know, we'd come home and she'd say, how was your day? And I'd say, man, I was busy. I'd say, how was yours? She said, busy. Great marriage. Awesome conversation going on here. So we had a little experiment, and we said, what if we take the word busy out of our vocabulary? Because there's definitely a better word than busy. And I was inspired by this book called Better Than Great. I can't remember all the fancy words they use, but it's called Better Than Great, and it's an entire book as a thesaurus for the word great. And I had no idea how many different words there were that you can use in place of great. Top shelf, wonderful, fascinating, intriguing, huge. There's a lot they categorize them. Anyway, sidebar. You'll see that book. Helps you write really good property descriptions. Great location. There's a better way to say that. So anyway, there's a better word than busy, and so we said, we took the word busy out of our vocabulary. So it took us a little while, but now we can actually have some more interesting conversations. How was your day? It was, Well, it was successful. I had a closing, and I met an agent, and you know, whatever.
Good. Okay, so don't ever ask him if he's busy.
And say, I know you're busy, but don't say that.
Okay, don't ever say that. Good job. Any other questions for Zach? No?
What about Bobby?
You know me so well. I don't have any questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
Like, what's your, outside of work, what's your secret passion? Maybe something we don't know about you. Yeah.
I have a lot of them.
What she asked is, what does Zach's passion outside of work?
I think I'm intrigued and fascinated by people who are passionate about what they do. If that's, I'm passionate about passion. But, so that's one thing, just people who kind of kick butt in whatever they do. I'm really intrigued by that, just successful people. Because people can be successful at so many different things. And not just judging that by monetarily or sales and, you know, kind of in the big picture. But I like music a lot. I play the drums and a little bit of piano, and I wanted to learn to play the mandolins. I did that a few years ago, and I played some guitar.
So we're gonna want some.
And but I don't. Yeah, I'm not great at those. I don't
What's
stay
another
busy
word
with
for
them.
great?
I know, that's why I just put it in air quotes. I also love photography, and I had a little, in the recession, I had a little side photography business that fed my passion for that for a hot minute. And that was exciting. And actually I used to photograph weddings. And I limited to 10 a year, and I would usually sell a house to 3 of them. So that was good.
Great.
And then, you know, changes, get married, usually want to buy a house. So that was good. What else? I like the outdoors a lot, although I don't spend much time outdoors as much as I'd like. What's your passion?
Oh, Doug.
What's your favorite recreational activity?
So I play basketball every Wednesday night with some other dads, and knock on wood, I have not hurt myself too badly yet. Because I'm not very good at basketball, but I'm always trying to get better. But I have a lot of fun with that. It's great exercise for an hour and a half, just running up and down. And there's a couple of 20-somethings that are out there. One of them was a former AAA baseball player, and so he's just a crazy good athlete, and trying to keep up with him is workout, so that's fun. But I like to go, usually we go to Fido, my family and I do, 2 or 3 times a month on a weekend to have breakfast. So that's our fun family activity.
Where are you living now?
I live on 3721 Central Avenue, and I've been in that Richland West End neighborhood for 11, 12 years now. I grew up first I had a place in Bellevue, and then we found a little house on Westbrook Avenue and bought it, and it had a lot of, I thought it was just weeds in the yard, and I knew it was a problem when I had 2 landscapers turn me away for the job. I thought we were just sort of doing some yard cleanup, but it was a lot more than that. So several commission checks later.
What was it?
Worth of like bulldozers and rebuilding retaining walls, and I don't know. It was a learning experience. We had a cute little cottage, and then sold that after about 5 years when we were having our second kid, and got a 3-bedroom. So a little 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath house on Central Avenue, and I love it. I never want to leave.
That's a neat story.
Mm-hmm.
Any more questions? Yes.
I have a question. Maybe top 1 to 3 bucket list items for you. Like, what's your future? Big picture
Wow.
future.
So this was interesting. It's just funny how things happen. But I got nominated for the 40 under 40 thing that the Business Journal does, and ended up getting, you know, put into that thing. And they asked me that question a few years ago, and I said, by the time I'm 40, I want to be leading the strongest real estate company in Nashville. And I'll be 40 in 7 days.
Ooh, you gotta go to
I
work.
think I'm part of the strongest real estate company in Nashville.
Yeah.
And that is
That's something.
just cool. So that's sort of the bucket list. So that's a continuing
That's a
bucket
big
list item. I have a lot of retirement plan. I'm a saver. I drive a old car and live in a modest house and kind of save a lot. So that's so I have some financial goals from that I've hit a couple of them, and I got some other big ones that I want to hit. But I really want to take my family to National Parks Out West. Not this week because they're closed, but
Yeah, don't do it.
but going to Yosemite and Yellowstone and doing some camping. I did a month-long trip. We drove 9,000 miles in 28 days, and right after I graduated college, and that was amazing. And I want to do that again with my family, but it's probably going to be a couple of years because hiking with a 2.5-year-old is different.
Well, you'd sit on your back.
Yeah, I have one of those things, but he's getting too big for it.
Andrea.
So aside from letting people know that they have an alternate future plan and letting them go at parks downtown, do you feel that you're the type of broker that helps develop people into being amazing brokers? Do you feel that that's part of your track record, and what part of your service as a broker would be to help other brokers or affiliate brokers identify their strengths so that they can flourish under your tutelage?
Are there any, I don't know, are there any, Todd, you're here, Jackie, you're here, I don't know, what do you think? Did you hear the question? I'm calling you out.
Yeah.
Some of my old people. I would say yes. I mean, that is absolutely. I love growing. I love helping people grow. I don't want to say I love growing people because I think that's it grows you. Bobby grows cows. But I love watching people grow and helping find whatever that thing is. And I think there's always, this is coaching, right? But there's always a level that you can get deeper with somebody. I read a book called The Coaching Habit a few years ago, and it really inspired me to keep digging with people and to get down to what makes them tick. And so yes, I think you said it much more eloquently than I am, so I need to get your wording on that. But yes.
And I hope you'll continue to let me help.
Absolutely. So Bobby's passion is education and coaching and training, and that's one of my passions too. But there's a lot of people here, and so we need help. So that's what I want you to
plan
do.
on continuing to coach.
Absolutely.
So we'll work together.
Yeah. Todd, you have one, and then Zach.
Is that Todd?
Yeah, that's Todd.
Hi,
So
Todd.
Todd's
I
got the
see
whole
you
hair.
all the
I didn't
time.
want you to think that I had nothing to offer because there's so much to offer, but I moved my license to Parks almost 3 years ago. And in that 3 years, my business has grown 40% a year. And I really, truly believe that just being around Zach and the team and the way that, especially when you talk about being open and available and the style of management that they have, it's kind of infectious. It kind of rubs off on you. You may not even realize it's happening sometimes, I think. But yeah, just some of the things that Zach has taught me. The Ninja Path is an amazing thing. It really changed my whole way of thinking in business and all that. So I can't say enough about Zach and what a great broker he is.
Oh, that's
You're very
wonderful.
kind. Thank you,
That's
Todd.
wonderful. Great endorsement.
So Zach,
What's up, Zach?
fellow namesake.
We got 3 Zachs.
Say hello.
Do we have more than 3? I think that.
I was just curious if you still do any photography. I know you're busy these days, but I think it's such a great talent of yours. I'm proud that you
Yeah.
got a headshot of mine. I wasn't the
I
greatest.
did. Funny enough, I did take
You
some
did
headshots.
my headshot.
I wasn't the greatest model, but I think you kind of worked it out.
That is one of my best headshots. I had to put it away. It's so long. I'm old.
You want to do another one?
Why don't you?
She looks awesome. So So yeah, I do. People ask me a lot, because people know that I'm into photography. They say, so what's the best camera? And I say, it's the one that's with you. Right? It's like, this is where most of my pictures are taken now. And I've got a bag with, 5 figures worth of camera equipment in it, but I don't pull it out very often. But I don't take pictures of my own listings because it's just not efficient. And there's people that are better than I am at it. And so, that outsourcing to the best people, I always want the best people to do the job. And so if I can be the best at it, then great. I did do a lot. I got back into it when 1212, Ray Hensler as a developer is incredible, a little crazy, and very, very demanding of something being just right. And I kept hiring photographers, and he kept firing them and saying that it wasn't right. And so he had a creative mind, and I understood kind of what he was looking for. And so I just went out one day, and we were doing 1212, and I took a few shots of some things, and he lit up, and he was like, "That's what it is. That's what it is." But it was being close to somebody, just understanding what they were looking for and what they wanted, and I think that's what we do as real estate agents, right? We listen, and we really hear people and hear our clients and understand not just what they're saying, but where they're trying to go, or what that end picture is for them. So anyway, I ended up selling 1212 with Brian and Sydney, and also having to do all the photography for it, which was a lot of fun because it shows you the building in a lot of different ways. I learned how to fly a drone, and I crashed a couple. But I like gizmos and gadgets, and so that was exciting. We had a marketing budget, so I just kept putting it on the marketing budget.
Angela,
where were you born and raised?
I was born in New Orleans and raised in New Orleans, and then.
you don't have that New Orleans accent.
How you mama now, huh?
It sounds like New York, but it's not.
That's right, it does. Is Brent here? Where's Brent? He was here a minute ago. Brent's from New Orleans. Brent and I can pull it out. No, Brent Cooper.
Brent Cooper's from? Oh, yeah.
So, but, yeah,
What was your address again?
3721 Central.
That's the house I grew up in when I was little.
You're kidding.
I knew it sounded familiar.
Seriously?
I mean, until I was like, I don't know, I just am looking at it. I need to come over. Still have the closet door upstairs that gets stuck and your kids get locked in.
My son.
I'm still in therapy
My
for
son,
that.
my son was very patiently yelling the other night, and we were like, what is he saying? Where is he coming from? And then we went upstairs and realized he was stuck.
I have a trick I can teach you.
So come on up.
That's
awesome.
really
It's
something.
not weird, and you need to get to know your across the street neighbors, the Workmans. They are some of our favorite
We have
people.
gotten our Christmas trees from the Workmans.
Oh yes, Bob. He doesn't sell the right kind of Christmas tree though.
No, they're
Has
not.
anyone broken the news to him yet? Yeah.
They're like the lonely.
Okay, that's just so good. You guys have a lot to talk about.
I'll be invited.
That's incredible.
That's amazing. Yolanda.
So will you be bringing us gumbo and etouffee?
Ashley's going to do that, actually, and Brent is going to do that, because Ashley's got some Louisiana roots too. She said, Ashley Brown said she's going to.
Oh, we
She's
hadn't
gonna bring it
had
up.
that.
Oh, we didn't know
Bring
that.
us some.
All my family's from Louisiana.
Well, I haven't seen any food that
So that's-
bears
I
that.
know,
So I will
Ray
try.
Cooper brought me some, bacon mix back from Captain
Yeah.
One, one year, and I made some.
Okay.
Crawfish.
My cooking skills are.
I know that we're getting close to
Oh,
the
Cause I'm from
end.
South Mississippi and I'm
There you
making
go.
me
And I promise that we stay on time. One more question, then we'll wrap up, and if you wanna stay, I don't know what your schedule is,
I'm
but
around. I'm available.
he's available. So, Millie,
My question is, I have 2 boys, 5 and a half and 2 and a half. And so what is your most consistent habit as a parent to turn yourself off from work? Like what is your daily consistent habit to
that's a
like?
good one.
Yeah, so that's a great one. So and actually this was a question I was going to ask Bobby, but I love habits, and I like to read a lot. And there's a great book called The Power of Habit as well. If you haven't read it, it's a good one. There's another one that I haven't read that's on my list, but it's called The Miracle Morning, and I think I do a lot of that. But when I get home, so my phone automatically goes on Do Not Disturb at 6 o'clock. But I have it so if you're trying to reach me after 6, you got to call twice in a row. And usually I'll glance at it to see, somebody calls or whatever. But if you call twice in a row, it'll buzz. But that way, if I forget to take it out of my pocket and leave it by the front door, which is what I promised my wife I'll do, then it doesn't ring. And that's been great, and it's been able to just let me focus. I also wake up really early, like 4:15 most days, and so that's I'm a little nutty with that. You have to go to bed early to do that too, but I read something, at least 10 pages of a book in the morning, and then I write 2 notes every day. Very ninja stuff. You've been through ninja, and then I just kind of plan out my day, and nobody's calling, nobody's emailing. I don't check my email for the first hour of the day, which I still check it in the morning, but that I felt like when I was doing that, I was just constantly in a batting cage, and I think you can feel like you're doing work when you're just responding to emails, but you're not really being proactive. And so this morning, for instance, my daughter got herself, again, I said this the other day, she's still on a roll, and she got herself up, dressed, and came downstairs, and I was, knee deep in something, and I said good morning, and she said good morning. She came and gave me a hug, and she said, will you have breakfast with me? I was like, absolutely, because I felt accomplished and done, and we got to have a nice little bowl of cereal together.
So you do a little time block.
It's kind of time blocking, basically. I'm not perfect at it.
Really?
No, not by
I
any
thought you
means.
were so perfect.
Yeah, still haven't mastered that, but that's the way I do it.
think you've mastered
The phone hack was life changing.
Zach, I really appreciate
Well, thank you.
being so honest, and I hope
You're
that
right.
I said the right one.
You did. Thank you, Bobby.